This is The World with me, Yalda Hakim, live from Beirut, as attacks between Israel and Hezbollah escalate tensions in the Middle East. The Israeli military claims to have killed several top Hezbollah commanders in an airstrike on the Lebanese capital. Among them, Ibrahim Akil, who was on the US most wanted list for decades. It comes after Hezbollah launched 140 rockets across the border at northern Israel today. Cross-border exchanges have escalated this week after dozens were killed in a series of exploding device attacks on Hezbollah members. Tonight, the crisis is being discussed at an emergency UN meeting, but a Lebanese minister I spoke to isn't confident of progress.
The world is silent on a very large-scale war crime.
We'll have the latest live from the region coming up on The World with me, Yalda Hakim. Good evening and welcome to this special edition of The World with me, Yalda Hakim. We're live here in the Lebanese capital, Beirut, a city targeted today for a third time this week by an Israeli attack. The IDF say they've killed several top Hezbollah commanders in an airstrike, including Ibrahim Akil, who had been on the US most wanted list for decades. It comes after a week of escalating tensions, with dozens killed in Lebanon during a series of exploding device attacks on Hezbollah members. Our special correspondent Alex Crawford reports.
This is what an Israeli military targeted strike looks like minutes afterwards. It's the southern suburbs of Lebanon's capital, Beirut, and there's mayhem. Pictures taken by residents show the strike appears to have flattened an entire high-rise block. Cars flipped, others caked in grey dust. Dozens began the search for survivors, with several trapped. The attack's the most deadly Israeli airstrike on the capital in nearly 2 decades. This area is heavily populated. Lebanese television stations aired pictures of homes. This suburb is packed with shops, markets and apartments, but it's also strictly controlled by the fighting group and considered a Hezbollah stronghold. The Israeli military say the strike killed a senior Hezbollah commander, the second member of the fighting group's top military body to be killed in 2 months, both in the capital. As people were hurriedly rushed to already overstretched hospitals for treatment, the country's health ministry said there were children among the dead, injured and missing. Army checkpoints were quickly established, but the bomb site is controlled by Hezbollah and access heavily restricted, particularly for foreign media.
We've been told to leave the area. Our pictures have been deleted. We're very close to the bomb site, but there's obviously tempers are at red rage point, and everyone, well, certainly the media is being cleared out of the area for now.
The airstrike came shortly after a volley of nearly 200 Hezbollah rockets into northern Israel. Many of them intercepted by the Iron Dome. Tens of thousands of people on both sides of the border have fled their homes as these tit-for-tat attacks have ramped up and up. But this was one of the heaviest days yet in nearly a year. The Israeli military has been burying its dead too. Hundreds gathered for the funeral of one of 2 Israeli soldiers killed on the border the day before. But Hezbollah's military command and weapons have been systematically targeted for months now, and they've suffered some strategic losses. But there's been a marked increase in exchanges over the past 24 hours. The Israeli airstrike in the capital has just sent the tensions soaring. The Lebanese caretaker government was holding an emergency cabinet meeting just before the airstrike, with ministers already incensed over the 2 days of pager and handheld radio explosions, which they blame Israel for too.
Things are escalating by the minute. We can see that there is more tension, there is more provocation, and it's very unfortunate because us as a government, along with all the diplomatic channels, we have been doing our best the past few months to get to a peaceful solution.
It's a genocidal, it's indiscriminate, it's a break of and violation of the international humanitarian law and every other law.
It's a war crime. and it was not something that would pass easily, trying to kill 3,000 or 4,000 civilians.
The Israeli military is claiming the Beirut bombing as a major success, saying without providing any evidence that the commander and his team were planning to attack northern Israel. But Lebanon is going through back-to-back days and nights of coping with major emergency after major emergency. Tensions are already inflamed, and this latest Israeli attack is being seen as hugely incendiary. Alex Crawford, Sky News, Beirut.
And Alex is here with me live in Beirut. Alex, we were speaking over the last day or so, strike 1, strike 2, today was strike 3. I mean, this is Hezbollah now in a complete state of disarray.
I mean, they're really on the back foot. I mean, they're reeling from what's happening. And to be honest, it's not just Hezbollah that's reeling, it's pretty much a whole nation, and certainly the capital. I mean, we've been hearing sonic booms the last couple of days anyway. That in itself is very intimidating for most ordinary people and civilians, but also a strike in the heart of the capital less than 2 months, or around about 2 months, since the previous strike. And this is a really crowded, heavily populated area full of ordinary civilians as well as Hezbollah. Now, this particular area, and maybe this apartment, it hasn't yet been confirmed by Hezbollah. Maybe there were a group of Hezbollah commanders, but there were also an awful lot of civilians around, including children, women, ordinary people who, you can see from the images, are still trapped under the rubble. The Lebanese Health Ministry is saying children are amongst the missing, the dead and the injured. So I think the Lebanese authorities, the Lebanese government, the caretaker government was holding an emergency cabinet meeting literally an hour or so before this happened, and they were already incensed against Israel, already saying that they'd committed war crimes because of their communication device explosions and 2 days of terror that they wrought on the country then, and calling for the UN to intervene, for the international community to make sure that international humanitarian law was upheld, because booby-trap bombs in civilian populations is against international humanitarian law. So they are absolutely furious and calling for intervention. On the other hand, the Israelis are seeing this as an incredible military success, saying that they've taken out, a group of the top Hezbollah commanders. Hezbollah hasn't confirmed that, but what is clear is that the fighting group is very much on the back foot right now.
Yeah, and it's unclear what the end game is for Israel, because, the Lebanese side are worried. This is not a question now of brink of war. This is a war. It's just a question of...
I mean, we're in it. We're in it now. And if you talk to the Lebanese, they say they've been involved in this war. They've been the victims of this war since October the 8th, when Hezbollah took a unilateral decision to enter it in defense of Gaza. And they've linked every attack since then with a ceasefire in Gaza. That looks nowhere near right now. We've even heard the US president insinuating that it's not going to happen anytime soon. So Lebanon and Lebanese people, as well as Hezbollah, are in a really big crisis right now. We had cabinet ministers saying that to me this afternoon. The country's in a crisis. It's on its knees economically. I spoke to the chief medical officer of the biggest hospital in Lebanon, who was saying he couldn't cope if another disaster happened within 48 hours, 72 hours. Now, that has happened. So the medical and health infrastructure is stretched beyond limits. And look at the number of people that are in Bahia right now. Hundreds and hundreds of people, medical workers, civilians, all involved in this disaster. So it's going to hit the country, and the implications regionally are really, really very severe. I think we're at peak worst point over the past year right now. And Hezbollah keep on saying they're going to hit back. So far, we've seen according to the Israelis, nearly 200 rockets into northern Israel. But that has really left them reeling, the response from Israel. And nothing looks good right now. It really looks absolutely grim at the moment.
And as you say, it's reached its peak. And the question is, what is the international community going to do, if anything? Alex, thank you so much for your reporting and for bringing us up to date. Alex was talking about what the situation here is on the ground, and the UN Security Council is currently meeting in New York to discuss the rising tensions here in the region. Let's just show you those live shots now. Speaking in the last hour, the UN Human Rights Chief said the targeting of thousands of people through communications devices without knowing who is in possession of them violates international law. Have a listen.
International humanitarian law prohibits the use of booby-trap devices in the form of apparently harmless portable objects which are specifically designed and constructed to contain explosive material. It is a war crime to commit violence intended to spread terror among civilians. I call again for an independent, thorough, and transparent investigation into the circumstances of these explosions. Those who ordered and carried out these attacks must be held to account.
It's the UN Security Council holding that emergency meeting. Let's go live to Washington now and speak with our Dominic Waghorn, who joins me live now. And Dom, there really is this flurry of diplomacy at the moment. I mean, this Security Council meeting, emergency meeting, was called before this strike that we saw today. It was to do with the pages exploding and the walkie-talkies exploding, and yet we have a third strike today. The tensions here are incredibly high, and there is an attempt to try and de-escalate this on some level.
Yeah, and this, I think, is a reflection of the concern of the UN as a body. Of course, it has a peacekeeping force in southern Lebanon, whose officials have been expressing their deep concern about the escalation of military activity over the border and what that might do to their peacekeeping force. And then as a group of nations, the UN obviously deeply concerned by what has been happening between Lebanon and Israel. I think this is a chance for diplomats to vent their outrage, if you like, at what Israel has done in terms of killing that number of people but injuring so many others in Lebanon, using this rather underhand tactic in the minds of many of using pagers and walkie-talkies. But also it's a chance to express real concern about the risk of escalation. Will the UN meeting lead to much? Probably not, beyond just being a talking shop and allowing people to vent that anger and concern, because the main players in this, Hezbollah and Israel, but also Hezbollah's patrons, Iran, none of them show much respect for the writ of the UN for various different reasons. So what is probably more crucial is what's happening here in the US Capitol, what American diplomats are doing. We heard from Joe Biden at the start of a cabinet meeting saying that there's a lot of work to try and bring about a ceasefire deal to let Israelis go back to their homes in northern Israel and the Lebanese return to their homes in southern Lebanon. And we've heard the White House spokesman John Kirby saying that intense diplomacy is underway. The real fear, I think, is, as we've had ever since October the 7th, this spectre of a much bigger war. Alex was saying there, we are in a war. We certainly are in a war of sorts, but the bigger war would be Hezbollah unleashing the 150,000 missiles at Israel. There are two reasons why that's thought not to have happened. A, the Lebanese were always thought never to forgive Hezbollah if they drew them into a bigger war. That may be less of an issue now if the Lebanese themselves believe that they have come under attack from Israel and need defending. The other reason is Iran has always been thought, ever since October the 7th, not to want a bigger war because they want to keep that arsenal of missiles for another day when the possibility of Israel attacking their nuclear facilities becomes real. But I think the more Hezbollah is hit, the more the fear is that they will feel weak and that will have to strike back in a much more significant way than they have already. So that, I think it's right, as Alex was saying there, we are at the most dangerous point in terms of Hezbollah-Israeli tensions that we've seen since October the 7th. And so for that reason, we have a multi-pronged major diplomatic initiative around the world to try and reduce the tensions and avert that risk of a much bigger war in the Middle East.
Yeah, I mean, Dom, certainly since October 7, the United States and Antony Blinken, Joe Biden, have continued to reiterate that they want the aim of all of this to be a ceasefire in Gaza and, of course, not to allow this conflict to escalate any further. It feels like they have failed on both those fronts because it doesn't seem like there can be a ceasefire in Gaza, certainly not on this side of the US election. And now the escalating situation here feels like it's spiraling out of control.
Yeah, and in fact, I mean, the White House pushed back against this today, but there are fairly well, I think, source reports claiming that the American government has pretty much given up on hope of a ceasefire this side of the end of the year. And privately, American diplomats will tell you they're not convinced Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu actually wants a ceasefire deal, possibly for his own political reasons, because it could lead to his coalition government collapsing. And they certainly aren't convinced that Hamas wants one either. And the problem with that, Yalda, of course, as you know, is that a ceasefire in the north is contingent on a ceasefire in Gaza. Hezbollah attacked Israel in the wake of October the 7th, and the Israelis will say that they have been fighting back against that, defending themselves, and they will say that these pager attacks and these walkie-talkie attacks and the assassinations of senior Hezbollah commanders, the most recent one we've seen most spectacularly today, all of that is part of their self-defense against Hezbollah. But yeah, certainly in terms of where this leads, there is deep concern about where this is going, and I don't think we're going to see Hezbollah relenting, because they feel they have a duty to support their brothers and sisters in Gaza. They're not going to do that until the war in Gaza comes to an end. So while that goes on and while these attacks continue, there is this ever-present risk of a much bigger war being unleashed, even if Iran doesn't want it to happen. Hezbollah might feel it has to go alone because it feels that it's been hit so badly. It's got to try and recover from that, because it's got to recover its power of deterrence.
Yeah, indeed. A very tense time. Dom, thank you so much. Well, earlier today, I spoke to the Lebanese Energy Minister, Walid Fayyad, and I started by asking him for his reaction to the events in Lebanon of the last few days. Have a listen.
Well, my reaction is we moved from targeted terror to distributed terror, distributed and blind terror. And this is alarming. In the sense that what we are seeing is that Israel is perpetrating what qualifies as war crimes in a blatant way and without any immediate condemnation. What I'm shocked not to see is an immediate, overwhelming condemnation by all countries of the world, all nations of the world, in the sense what we have seen in the media, in front of our own eyes, is civilian people in the supermarkets or going about their business in the city of Beirut and anywhere else in Lebanon, and dying or getting injured by the hundreds from this attack that was perpetrated deliberately in a clear, how do I say, contradiction with and disobedience to all laws, humanitarian international laws, or UN resolutions with respect to the relation between Israel and Lebanon. And accordingly, what we are seeing indeed is very alarming, because the world is silent on a very large scale.
Overnight, we did hear from the UK Foreign Secretary calling for a ceasefire, calling for a de-escalation. We heard Antony Blinken, the US Secretary of State, say the same. The French president has come out and said he, expresses sorrow to the Lebanese people for what's happened. Do you think that is sufficient? Because your leaders are also heading to the UN. They are they're in New York at the moment, planning for the UN General Assembly. What are you asking the international community to do at this stage?
We are losing faith with the international laws, with the international forums, with the ability of the UN to enforce any law and order at world scale and at regional scale. We would be certainly asking for the implementation of UN resolutions and for the implementation of the latest Security Council decision asking Israel to stop its attacks on the Palestinians and on the Lebanese.
Are you hopeful, though?
I would be hopeful, if that happens, that we would obtain peace, at least from our side of the border, for sure, if that happens. And this has been now a year, and such requests have not been.
Why do you think
attended.
that is? Because it has been almost 11 months of this concern about escalation.
On one side, we have a situation in Israel where the government is not in a stable position to reach the ceasefire that it must and should reach. But we also have another problem, which is that in the current international setting and the geopolitical scene, I am seeing that the international forces, Western forces and regional forces, are not forceful enough in putting pressure, especially on the government of Israel.
But that's what I want to get at. Why do you think that pressure is not coming? Because Tony Blinken, President Biden is saying, look, we're trying what we can do and trying to put pressure, but you know, they're not listening.
Well, I'm not here to analyze the root causes that are sometimes they can be driven by.
But do you think the Americans should be doing
by
more?
National priorities, and you have a situation in the U.S. where it's currently the election race time, and there are lobbies that are very strong in the U.S.
Minister, don't you think, though, your government also has a responsibility to rein in or put pressure on Hezbollah as well? Because when you speak to the Israelis, they're concerned about what's happening in the north of their country. 60,000 of their civilians have been evacuated as well.
Where this question is coming from. At the same time, you have to understand that for the longest duration, for the longest times, it has been Israel that has been breaking the laws, whether the laws in terms of the relation with Lebanon, but also the laws in terms of the relation with the Palestinians and all the Arab nations. And we are in a position where we cannot stand against our own people, in a sense, and in a position where it is clear that Israel has to stop the aggression in order to reach stability at the border.
Minister, you're the energy minister. Are you worried that this conflict could escalate and that Lebanon's energy sector could also be targeted through cyber warfare or otherwise?
I don't want to sound overly alarming, but the escalation that we are seeing is worrisome. As I said earlier, we went from a targeted attacks to almost, I want to call them distributed attacks and blind attacks, because these explosions happens with the perpetrator not knowing where those devices necessarily are, because there's old generation devices. So it means that, yes, we went to a place that is much more uncertain and much less safe, and the cyber, this is a dual cyber and explosion implantation in the supply chain attack. So with the warfare of this nature, yes, we can worry about attacks on infrastructure using cyber warfare, whether in the power sector, the telecom sector, the healthcare sector, the water sector, or all sectors. But obviously, escalating in this direction is not good for neither Lebanon nor the neighbor of Lebanon, whether Palestine or the Israeli population. It's not good for anyone.
Minister, are you personally terrified about a potential war looming over this country?
It's a good question to ask. I happen to have been raised during the Lebanese civil war. And so we, in a sense, were used to seeing many big atrocities. And I remain always hopeful that we can rise from these challenges stronger and more united. We have seen with the recent attack that was really, as I said, a big war crime, and that was uncalled for.
And Minister, just finally, what message do you have for global leaders who are currently meeting in New York to discuss this issue, but also at the General Assembly next week?
World leaders happen to have a lot of leverage. Whether in the supply of ammunition or in the supply of financial support to the state of Israel. It is in their hands to use this leverage to put a stop to these atrocities and to start going in the right direction, a direction that allows to instill the peace and stability in the region rather than complete chaos and risking everybody's lives and escalation into a much broader conflict.
Minister, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
was the Lebanese Energy Minister Walid Fayad speaking to me there a little earlier. This is The World with me, Yalda Hakim. We're live from Beirut. Coming up, as the UN Security Council discusses rising tensions in the Middle East, we'll hear from Israel's permanent representative to the United Nations.
Gives you the very best of Sky News wherever you are. Breaking news, videos, analysis, up at 6%. Podcasts, watching us live.
Joins us live.
All in one place, and all at just the touch of a screen. The Sky News app. Get the full story first.
Independent United Kingdom.
These last few years have seen some huge stories. And these stories have been driven by politics, by politicians, the people in power.
You must stay at home.
And it's my job to figure out how these decisions made by politicians impact all of us in our everyday lives.
This is the worst thing I've ever been through in my life.
People turn up here with their child stuff in a black sack and just say, I don't want to.
And that is what it is. It's first-class poverty.
Is this an example of the welfare state failing?
We take you to the heart of the stories that shape our world.
These are stories that affect us all. Millions of children are now having to catch up. Some stories have changed all of our lives. Because like the residents, the staff are being infected. Politicians, they make decisions all of the time, and it's our job to hold them to account. I wonder if you will take this opportunity to apologise to those families. But in the end, the real power doesn't actually lie with the politicians. The real power lies with the people. I'm Nick Martin. I'm the People and Politics correspondent at Sky News.
I say, bring it on.
With America divided and tensions running high, get ready for an election like no other.
Join our teams as we follow the campaign trail as America decides.
We will win, win, win.
Get closer to the action this US election with full reaction and analysis.
Sky News, the full story first.
Our app gives you the very best of Sky News wherever you are. Breaking news, videos and analysis.
Evidence of the crisis.
Podcasts, watching us live.
Live here from Washington.
Wherever you get your podcast.
All in one place. And all at just the touch of a screen. The Sky News app. Get the full story first.
There's always more to the news than a headline. We want to discover, to delve a little deeper, to find out what's really going on. Explanation, analysis, the people at the heart of every story. I'm Neil Patterson, and this is the Sky News Daily Podcast. So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better. Available wherever you get your podcasts.
Welcome back to The World with me, Yalda Hakim, live from Beirut. Well, as tensions continue to escalate here in the Middle East, the UN Security Council is holding an emergency session this evening to discuss the situation in Lebanon. Ahead of that meeting, a little earlier, I spoke to Israel's permanent representative to the United Nations, Ambassador Danny Danon. Have a listen.
We have no intention to have full escalation or war with Lebanon or with Hezbollah. But we cannot continue with the situation as it is, that since October 8th, Hezbollah is launching rockets and missiles into Israel. And you ask yourself why? What is the cause of the conflict? And Nasrallah himself said it, is to show sympathy for the attacks of Hamas. So it's either going to end through diplomacy or through military actions. We prefer diplomacy. There are a few proposals on the table. We are willing to negotiate. We don't want to see full escalation. But at the same time, we cannot allow tens of thousands of Israelis to be refugees in their own country.
I understand the pressure that you are wanting to put on Hezbollah because of the rockets that have been launched on Israel and, as you say, the tens of thousands of civilians who have been evacuated from their homes. But I guess I want you to respond to this idea that civilians are being killed based on even today's what you would call targeted strike on Ibrahim Akil, a senior commander of the Special Forces unit of Hezbollah, the Radwan unit. That I understand, but 8 people were killed in that. Almost 60, maybe more, were injured. This is a densely populated area with civilians who are living and moving around in this area. Do you think that's a responsible act?
I think the blame is on the terrorists themselves, who are hiding behind civilians. Mr. Akil is a notorious terrorist. He has the blood of hundreds of Americans and Israelis on his hands. And I think many people will be relieved tonight when they know that he will not be with us anymore. The blame is on Hezbollah. They are cowards who are hiding behind civilians. So don't blame us. We are doing everything in our power to use precise weapons and to target only the terrorists. And we regret the loss of life of any innocent people. And if you see the picture of the attack, you can see that it was a precise attack in a location that Mr. Akil and his colleagues, who were all terrorists, were sitting together plotting another attack against Israel.
I'm not disputing Ibrahim Akil and his everything that you are saying that he has done, the blood on his hands, the fact that there was a $7 million bounty on his head by the U.S. Treasury. I'm hearing you out when you say that. What I am talking about is this is not a group of terrorists hiding behind civilians. This is a meeting that was held, but in a densely populated area. So I'm just asking about the densely populated area being targeted in the way that it was.
Yalda, let's look ahead of us. If there will be no diplomatic solution, what do you think will happen? There will be rockets flying into Israel, and we will hunt down the Hezbollah terrorists, and they will hide next to civilians. That's what they are doing. And the cost on both sides will be heavy. We want to avoid that. But unfortunately, if it will continue, what we saw today, it will be only the beginning, because we will do whatever is needed to push Hezbollah from the fence and allow our civilians to go back home. We have no desire to enter Lebanon. We have no desire to attack Lebanon. But at the same time, we have no choice.
Do you not feel, Mr. Ambassador Danon, that these actions are escalating the situation here?
We have been waiting for almost a year now. Since October 7th, we have been waiting. We contained many casualties, many attacks, including civilians, including young Druze children who were massacred in their village playing soccer. So we waited. And I think we can finish it now. If Hezbollah will stop the attacks against Israel today, tonight, then we will not have an escalation. But if they will continue with those attacks, we will have no choice. We will retaliate. It will be painful. And the people of Lebanon and Israel will pay the price.
Ambassador, I just want to shift your focus on events in the West Bank. We have seen images of IDF forces pushing the bodies, lifeless bodies, over buildings. I know that the IDF is currently investigating, but is this the kind of conduct that, we are seeing? Is it acceptable?
First of all, let's put it in perspective. Today in the West Bank, unfortunately, we have a lot of terror activities that is ignited in Tehran, the same way they try to take advantage of Lebanon.
But I'm talking about the bodies being thrown over buildings, lifeless bodies. Doesn't an army, when it is conducting a military operation...
We were neutralizing a terror cell who was plotting to kill hundreds of Israelis. So yes, we are active in Judea and Samaria today because of the involvement of the Iranians, the flooding the area with weapons. We are looking into those pictures. We will investigate them. But, we're fighting the terrorists. And sometimes you see ugly pictures when you do that activity.
That was Ambassador Danny Danon speaking to me there a little earlier. Well, this is The World with me, Yalda Hakim, live from Beirut. Coming up, I'll be speaking to an MP here in Beirut after Israel strikes the Lebanese capital. Join us for that.
what's left of it.
Tanks, heavy vehicle.
Why only in America?
People want their country to work.
You want a job in a normal life.
Why are these homes empty?
I want you to be honest with people.
That has happened within minutes.
Sky News, the full story first. Free wherever you get your news. Welcome back to Sky News live from Beirut, where today there has been another serious escalation in the conflict between Israel and Hezbollah. The IDF claims to have killed 11 senior Hezbollah commanders, including Ibrahim Akil, in an airstrike on the Lebanese capital. Akil is believed to be one of the masterminds behind the bombing of the American embassy in Beirut in 1983 and an attack on the U.S. Marine barracks the same year. It comes after a week of rising tensions in the region. Well, let's discuss this further with Lebanese MP Melhem Khalaf, who joins me now live. Thank you very much, Mr. Khalaf, for joining us here on the programme. I want to, first of all, get your reaction to the escalating tensions here and certainly the strikes that have taken place in Lebanon.
Look, the violence is not a solution. Never was it, never will it be. Seeking a viable solution to the problems that have been undermining the region for more than a century now is crucial. This can only happen if the nations of the world coordinate to reach and impose a viable solution based on justice and respect of the human and the humanitarian rights, and grounded on the respect of the rule of law by all the states. If not,
Mr.
we will...
Melhem, are you hopeful that that is going to actually happen, though?
I don't hear you, sorry.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, but I have a voice of somewhere outside.
It's just the pictures of the events of the day.
Okay.
You're listening to the program at the same time. But I just want to know, you're saying that the international community needs to act, and we have continued to hear that in Lebanon over the course of the last few days. But are you hopeful that that is likely to happen, that there will be some kind of intervention and this situation will de-escalate?
Look, we are afraid about this, and we suppose we have to restore how to say it? We have to restore the legitimacy, international legitimacy. If not, we will go to the jungle law. We have to restore the values. We have to protect the civilians. You know, in the international humanitarian law, this international law was established on the awareness of humanity of the importance of protecting civilians during armed conflict. Since Solferino and till the Second World War, the values were transformed in Convention of Geneva, and the war also have a law. For this reason, if we don't respect all these things, if we don't
Mr. Khalaf,
respect,
are you worried
yes.
at this moment? Are you worried at this moment that those international laws are not being adhered to and it's not being respected, and that this is a very dangerous moment now? Is this your concern?
Yes, right. Of course, we are afraid because, first of all, Lebanon cannot admit anymore this violence, and we cannot be in this situation. Look, actually, we are afraid. All the population are afraid. All our people now, you know, the last attack this night, we have many civilians, many children, many families who are so terrified. For this reason, we need reasonable voices in the United Nations to make pressure against Israel. And now you have just to know, till now, we have some drones over the sea. And it's unbelievable how the violation of sovereignty of Lebanon. It's unbelievable. And for this reason, we appeal about the international legitimacy. We have to restore this values. If no, we live in the jungle law.
Yeah, Mr. Melhem Khalaf, we're really grateful that you've joined us here on the program tonight.
Thank you.
Well, as you can hear in the voices of so many Lebanese people, officials, ordinary people, there is a real sense of concern. More than concerned, people here are terrified because of the level of uncertainty. They're unsure if this is where it will end. We saw the pages exploding on Tuesday. We saw the walkie-talkies exploding on Wednesday. And then this targeted strike in a densely populated area in southern Beirut, in a Hezbollah stronghold today, which has left a number of people dead and dozens injured. We are waiting to see how this situation escalates. We said the UN Security Council is holding an emergency session to discuss the rising tensions here in the Middle East. And of course, the UN General Assembly is next week, and we will be following all the developments. But for now, Gillian, back to you in the studio.